Election campaigns in full swing in New Hampshire, bellwether state of the nation, that goes to the polls on March 10th to cast its vote. There are parades and rallies in the Granite State and lots of excitement as the candidates carry their campaigns to the people. The following specially recorded program is sponsored by the Goldwater for President Committee. It brings you Barry Goldwater's campaign in New Hampshire. Here he speaks out on the issues as he sees them.
I've never seen so many frustrated people as we have around Washington. They're frustrated mostly because they haven't any faith in the American system. They've lost confidence in the Constitution. They've lost confidence in the fact that a strong nation has to be strong, has to show its strength, and has to let its enemies know what they're going to do. The question in my mind is, how can you prevent war with policies that are making communist countries content with communism, or foreign aid policies that are making them even more content? And at the same time, nuclear policies which alienate our NATO allies. You cannot stop a man who has vowed to bury you by sending him shovels, by feeding and clothing his friends, while denying your friends the means to help protect you. You can't stop him by letting him edge up closer and closer to you, as he's doing right now. Now, I firmly believe that the only way to secure the peace without war is to pile on the economic pressures that will disrupt the enemy, lose him his friends, and confront him with a united and a determined NATO and a very firm and understandable foreign policy. Now, this leads me up to the subject of peace. Since President Eisenhower left office, our foreign policy position has deteriorated until today we watch almost daily the slippage of the United States around the world as more and more and more countries begin to disbelieve us, begin to distrust us, and begin to look elsewhere for the leadership that must be portrayed if peace is to be obtained and maintained in this world.
Here again on the same subject, foreign policy.
Foreign policy is far and away the greatest interest. I would say that it ranks probably 8 to 10 times above the next issue that seems to be on the minds of the people of New Hampshire. Now, you'd normally expect more interest on the eastern seaboard in this subject, but I find on the West Coast and in the Rocky Mountains and the Middle West this same concern for what's happening to America around the world. And I find a great and growing desire to see a change that will result in a foreign policy that can guarantee peace in this world for our lifetime and the lifetime of our children and our grandchildren. Peggy and I have 4 children, and we have 4 grandchildren. And I don't want to see this country reach the point that the only escape other than surrender to slavery is a war. I think with proper guidance, I think with sensible guidance, with courage, not cowardice, with firmness, not weakness, that we can contribute to the peace that will keep these children and grandchildren at peace and comfort during their lives.
It's just a short hop by plane from Washington to New Hampshire, and Barry Goldwater's made the trip many times in the last month. He puts the flying time to good use, keeping up with national affairs and his many responsibilities in the Senate. A familiar sight, and more familiar sights to the veteran campaigner. Brother, was it cold in February, but a touch of cold can't stop a campaign, can't stop a New Hampshire crowd. They came out in droves to hear what this candidate had to say, and he spoke out on foreign policy, Social Security, communism, foreign aid, the United Nations, Cuba. Wherever he went, he faced the same issues, the same questions, and he answered them the same way. He told the people he supported Social Security, but he was concerned that inflation would devalue their Social Security dollar. He told the people only a strong America can guarantee freedom. He said appeasement and accommodation cannot assure peace. He called for personal responsibility in government at the local level because Barry Goldwater wants to give the government back to the people. He called for a re-examination of the UN Charter. Listen now as he speaks out on the UN.
When you set up a charter by which you're going to live in an organization, particularly an organization like the United Nations devoted to peace, and you violate what I believe to be two of the important covenants, namely you're not going to engage in aggression, nor are you going to interfere in the internal workings of a country, then you have become dishonest, and we would not have done this, in my opinion, had we not been imposed upon to do it by the other nations in the United Nations who see no wrong in violating the Charter. This is the same, we get into the same position when we argue about Red China coming in the United Nations. The Charter very clearly says no aggressor nation shall belong to the United Nations. We already have Russia, and to me it's an academic argument. We say they can't come in, so if we say that, Red China can't be admitted. But you and I know that the chances are pretty good for their being admitted. This is one of the reasons that I have repeatedly suggested that the United Nations meet for a charter revision.
And now the people of New Hampshire speak out for Barry Goldwater.
Well, I just had the pleasure of shaking hands with our next president, I'm pretty sure. I like his plan, and I like his way of speaking, and I think he's going to keep his promises, his campaign promises. And I know one thing, he won't be a yes man for any party.
Well, I don't think of him so much really as a politician, but just as a man. I'm very impressed with him.
I'm extremely proud that we have an American with guts enough to put America back where it belongs.
I'm opposed to foreign aid, economic aid. I've never voted for it since I've been in the Senate, and I wouldn't even if they divide it into the three components that foreign aid is made up of as we mention it. We have military assistance, which I think is necessary for some years to come, and I could vote for this. And we have technical assistance, which I think is the best program we have. This is teaching other people how to do things with their hands that we can do. But foreign economic aid, since the Marshall Plan, has not, in my opinion, bought us any friends, and I don't think you can buy friendship. I can't buy yours, and you can't buy mine. But if you show me how to do something that you know how to do that makes you live better than I do, I'm going to be your friend. And that's the way I think we should be proceeding. If we have to have foreign aid, if we can't live without it, and I think we can, then why not try a multilateral approach where some other countries get in the act? We may be the richest country in the world, but we can't afford to support the rest of the world much longer.
In the course of Barry's campaign, he's traveling the length and breadth of the country, literally thousands of miles. And wherever they can, his family, his wife, Peggy, and their 4 children are joining in his campaign. He's meeting the people face to face, and they're getting to know him and his family. Here's his younger daughter, Peggy. They call her Little Peggy. And his younger son, Mike. It's because he's a devoted family man that Barry Goldwater entered the presidential race, because he believes so strongly in a free America, because he's dedicated to preserving the peace for all American families. Wherever he goes, he speaks out, clearly and forcefully on the issues, answers questions, explains exactly where he stands on domestic and foreign policy. Everywhere he goes, the people are responding with enthusiasm for this new and different kind of statesman. Barry Goldwater has been constantly on the go. It's a grueling schedule. And whenever he can, he catches a quick nap here with his daughter, Peggy, and with his wife, Peggy. But soon it's back to the campaign, where Barry Goldwater is calling for courage and integrity in meeting problems. He's calling for an end to do-nothing policies, for progress based on the dynamic principles of the Republic. He's calling for a rebirth of individual freedom.
We put our reliance upon freedom, upon the free enterprise system. We reject, therefore, the ideas of the economic planners in Washington that a group of people sitting in Washington can plan what the country is going to make, where it's to be made, the quality of the product, the price of the product, the wages to be paid, the profit to be made, etc., etc. We know that this system, which in simpler terms is called socialism, has never worked in the history of the earth and is not working today in countries where it's been tried.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. I hope you make it.
Thank you very much.
Read your book, agreed with you long ago.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
How do you do?
Hi, how are you?
Well, I think Mr. Goldwater is the man that we need. I think this country has gone away from the principles on which it was founded, and I think he's the man that will bring us back to the days of free enterprise and the vigor and youth that this country had and the enthusiasm that the people had.
As far as I'm concerned, he's the only man that should be president because he is the only man who stands for something.
I think he's the first man to run for president that I've seen in the past 30 years that will stand on the principles of the founding fathers who wrote the federal Constitution.
Social Security is a contract between the federal government and you. And when I say you, it's all of we American people who pay Social Security. I don't believe in breaking contracts, and neither does the government. And I have never at any time advocating doing away with Social Security. Now, what I am concerned about, though, and I wish there were more of us in the Senate like Norris Cotton and myself who'd worry about this, is the fact that you, all of us, paying our money in, paying our dollars into Social Security, when we get to the age to get it back, we're not going to get our dollar back. Now, the dollar today has reduced in value over 50% from what it was a mere 20 years ago. Yet we're going to see a greater decrease with more and more inflation. Now, I don't believe in inflation, and I don't think we need to have unusual inflation in this country. But to invite inflation by the constant deficit spending that we're doing, this is what I'm trying to talk about in Social Security. I'm trying to get the older people and the younger people to realize that if this kind of wasteful expenditure continues in our government, that when it comes time for them to get their Social Security, they're not going to do too well. And I don't think you have to go further than to ask the recipient today of Social Security if they're living very high off the hog. And they're not. I remember when I first went to work, I read an ad in a magazine that's long since out of business, retire on $125 a month. And they had a picture of a man and his wife sitting under a palm tree or an orange tree in Florida. So I bought one. It's all paid up. And when I get to be 65, I can retire on $125 a month. Trouble is, that won't even buy an orange tree.
Here in Exeter, New Hampshire, and in towns all over the state, Goldwater has found a wonderful reception. He's found the people warm, friendly. His wife has been well received, and there's been a surging groundswell of support for Goldwater's ideal of individual freedom and growing support for Goldwater, the man. Sometimes the man has to pause to take a brief rest. But after a quick nap, his great strength and vitality are refreshed, renewed, and he's ready to meet the people once again. And everywhere he's urging the voters to get out and vote, to vote for individual freedom on March the 10th.
And why I attach so much importance to the vote on March the 10th, and why I urge you, along with Norris and Stewart and the others, to get out on that day and get your friends to the poll and make your vote count.
Barry Goldwater urges you to take a fresh look at American policy, at home and abroad. For an American victory in 1964, vote for Barry Goldwater.